There are words that do more than leave your lips. They carve pathways in the unseen. And there are words that don't simply dissolve into the air. They anchor you to places where God never intended you to stay. This is why Jesus didn't come only to heal physical wounds. He came to heal languages, to restore the vocabulary of the soul. Because whatever you speak reveals what you genuinely believe, and what you believe shapes the reality you end up living. How many times have you said something small, yet it felt heavy, almost like a verdict written over your own life? I can't take this anymore. Nothing ever works for me. I think God forgot about me. These sentences sound like simple outbursts, but spiritually, they function as contracts. Jesus knew this, which is why he warned us clearly. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Matthew 12:34. What flows out of you is not just sound, it is seed. It is construction material for the unseen world. And this is precisely what God wants to address with you today. Maybe you find yourself in a season where everything feels stuck. Your heart is tired. Your mind is crowded. Your faith seems muted. You look at your life and it feels like you've done everything you could, yet nothing seems to shift. And in moments like this, the mind begins to persuade you to speak what you shouldn't. I've tried everything. There's no solution. This is just who I am now. These statements look small, but operate as locks you place on yourself from the inside. But Jesus came to unlock these very doors. He wants to remind you that the tongue is the most powerful instrument a human being carries. And the same mouth that prays can, without noticing, curse its own journey. This is why Scripture says, "Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Proverbs 18:21. And that is exactly why you need to hear this message until the end. Because today, we will talk about the words that pull you away from the promise and the words that bring you closer to it. And at the end, we will pray together. But it won't be an ordinary prayer. It will be a spiritual recalibration, a moment of inner restoration when God Himself teaches you to exchange "I can't" for "God can in me." So stay with me until the final moments, because the prayer that awaits you will be the turning point your heart has needed. Take a breath, because perhaps without realizing it, you have been using against yourself the very power God placed inside you to overcome. The first thing Jesus would whisper to a wounded soul is this: stop saying it's too late. That sentence is a spiritual trap, because when you say it's too late, you are declaring that time is more powerful than God. But time is not your enemy. Time is a servant of the one who made you a promise. Jesus said, "My Father is always working, and so am I." John 5:17. Meaning, while you assume nothing is happening, heaven is already in motion. When Lazarus died, Martha told Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." John 11:21. She believed Jesus was powerful, just no longer in time. But Jesus answered her, "I am the resurrection and the life." He didn't say "I was." He didn't say "I will be." He said, "I am." Because God doesn't arrive late. He arrives in His hour. And His hour is the only one where the impossible becomes reality. So if you've been saying it's too late, Jesus is telling you right now, as long as you have breath, I can still do what you cannot imagine. Another destructive sentence is, "I don't deserve it." This phrase is born from guilt, comparison, and pain. And Jesus confronted this mindset when He told the story of the prodigal son. That young man practiced his apology the entire walk home. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." Luke 15:21. But before he could finish, the father ran towards him. Before he could explain, the father embraced him. Before he could justify anything, the father clothed him again. This is how God answers your guilt, with grace. Guilt says, "You failed." Grace says, you're still mine. When you keep saying, I don't deserve it, you are diminishing the price that was already paid for you on the cross. Jesus wants you to stop labeling yourself by your mistakes and start remembering the promise He placed over your life. Because those who are forgiven don't need to hide, they need to walk. And whoever walks with God walks towards a new beginning. There are also those who keep repeating, I can't change. This is one of the most subtle and dangerous sentences a person can say. It sounds realistic, but it is a pact with stagnation. Jesus often encountered people trapped inside themselves long before He set them free externally. And He would always ask a profound question: do you want to be healed? Because faith begins in desire. Transformation begins in willingness. When you say, I can't, you shut the very door you're asking God to open. How many times have you looked in the mirror and whispered, I can't do this, only to feel your faith fade quietly afterwards? That is not coincidence. Words shape atmosphere, and every time you declare limitation, heaven waits in silence for you to shift your tone, because the Holy Spirit acts where there is permission. Faith manifests where there is declaration. You are not imprisoned by your patterns. You are the reflection of God's image, and God does not create the impossible to abandon you. He allows the impossible to reveal His power to transform you. Deep inside, you may have repeated another painful sentence: God doesn't hear me. This one cuts deeper than the others. It is born from silence, waiting, and prayers that feel unanswered. But understand this: God's silence is never absence. It is preparation.
While you assume He is distant, He is working in layers you cannot yet perceive. The psalmist wrote, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. Psalm 40, verse 1. Note this carefully. He waited patiently, not anxiously, because faith isn't measured by how fast God responds, but by how consistently you trust. When you declare, God doesn't hear me, you imply heaven is deaf. But heaven answers those who persist. Jesus said, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. Matthew 7, verse 7. Notice Jesus did not say knock once. He said keep knocking, because persistence is the language of those who believe. And maybe this is exactly what the Lord is teaching you today, to change what you speak so He can change what you live. And now that you're beginning to understand this truth, stay with me until the final moment, because at the end of this message we will pray together. But not just any prayer, a cleansing of every word spoken in pain, a breaking of every sentence you pronounced over your own destiny, a moment of spiritual realignment where the weight of old words is exchanged for the lightness of God's presence. So don't leave yet. The next moments may be the turning point of your journey. Have you ever realized that what destroys your peace isn't what others say about you, but what you repeatedly whisper about yourself? The words you speak when no one is around have far more power than the ones you say in public, because they are the true dialogue of the soul. And it is often within that private conversation that spiritual sabotage begins. A sabotage that prevents you from walking into what God planned for you. The human mind is like a fertile field. Every word is a seed. Doubt is a weed. Faith is a root. And those who sow murmuring will reap scarcity, because murmuring is the verbal declaration of chaos. This is why when Israel murmured in the desert, the promised land remained far away. They weren't stopped by enemies, they were paralyzed by what they said among themselves. In Numbers 14, verse 28, God says, As surely as I live, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. In other words, what you repeat with conviction, heaven receives as decree. How many times have you decreed defeat without noticing? How many times after a moment of disappointment did you mutter, I was born to suffer. I guess I'll never be happy. These are the most dangerous phrases because they sound like harmless venting, but spiritually they are agreements with pain. Jesus never said, "Speak what you feel." He said, "Speak what you believe." In Mark 11 verse 23, he taught, "Whoever says to this mountain, 'Be removed and cast into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, it will be done." Notice the pattern: say and believe. That is the key. Speaking what you feel is human. Speaking what you believe is divine. Life changes when you stop using your mouth as an echo of pain and start using it as an instrument of faith. Because when you declare what God declares, the impossible begins to reorganize itself around you. But there is another sentence, more subtle and more destructive than all the others. I am alone. It is spoken through tears, through prayers, through silent nights. And Jesus answered this phrase without anyone needing to say it. Before ascending to heaven, he looked at his disciples and said, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28 verse 20. Always, not only when you feel him, not only when everything goes well, even now. You may not perceive him, but he is present in the breath sustaining you, in the strength helping you rise, in the peace returning without explanation. And when you say, "I'm alone," heaven whispers, "I never left." There is an invisible battle happening every time you choose between repeating pain or declaring faith. And the enemy knows this well. This is why he tries to convince you to use your own voice against yourself, because the mouth is an altar where we offer sacrifice, and that sacrifice can be faith or surrender. Every time you complain, you worship the problem. Every time you give thanks, you worship the solution. So what altar have you been raising? The altar of murmuring or the altar of gratitude? The altar of guilt or the altar of promise? Jesus never asked you to deny your suffering. He invites you to change the language with which you face it. When he stood before the cross, he didn't say, "I can't do this." He said, "It is finished." John 19 verse 30. Those three words altered eternity, because in that moment, he wasn't announcing defeat. He was announcing the beginning of restoration for everything that had been lost. And maybe this is exactly what the Lord is teaching you today, to change what you speak so he can change what you live. And now that you're beginning to understand this truth, stay with me until the final moment, because at the end of this message, we will pray together, but not just any prayer, a cleansing of every word spoken in pain, a breaking of every sentence you pronounced over your own destiny, a moment of spiritual realignment where the weight of old words is exchanged for the lightness of God's presence. So don't leave yet. The next moments may be the turning point of your journey. Have you ever realized that what destroys your peace isn't what others say about you, but what you repeatedly whisper about yourself? The words you speak when no one is around have far more power than the ones you say in public, because they are the true dialogue of the soul. And it is often within that private conversation that spiritual sabotage begins, a sabotage that prevents you from walking into what God planned for you. The human mind is like a fertile field. Every word is a seed. Doubt is a weed. Faith is a root. And those who sow murmuring will reap scarcity, because murmuring is the verbal declaration of chaos. This is why when Israel murmured in the desert, the promised land remained far away. They weren't stopped by enemies. They were paralyzed by what they said among themselves. In Numbers 14 verse 28, God says, "As surely as I live, I will do to you the very things I heard you say." In other words, what you repeat with conviction, heaven receives as decree. How many times have you decreed defeat without noticing? How many times after a moment of disappointment did you mutter, "I was born to suffer. I guess I'll never be happy"? These are the most dangerous phrases because they sound like harmless venting,
but spiritually, they are agreements with pain. Jesus never said, "Speak what you feel." He said, "Speak what you believe." In Mark 11, verse 23, he taught, "Whoever says to this mountain, 'Be removed and cast into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, it will be done." Notice the pattern: say and believe. That is the key. Speaking what you feel is human. Speaking what you believe is divine. Life changes when you stop using your mouth as an echo of pain and start using it as an instrument of faith. Because when you declare what God declares, the impossible begins to reorganize itself around you. But there is another sentence, more subtle and more destructive than all the others. I am alone. It is spoken through tears, through prayers, through silent nights. And Jesus answered this phrase without anyone needing to say it. Before ascending to heaven, he looked at his disciples and said, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28, verse 20. Always, not only when you feel him, not only when everything goes well, even today. You may not perceive him, but he is present in the breath sustaining you, in the strength helping you rise, in the peace returning without explanation. And when you say, "I'm alone," heaven whispers, "I never left." There is an invisible battle happening every time you choose between repeating pain or declaring faith. And the enemy knows this well. This is why he tries to convince you to use your own voice against yourself, because the mouth is an altar where we offer sacrifice. And that sacrifice can be faith or surrender. Every time you complain, you worship the problem. Every time you give thanks, you worship the solution. So what altar have you been raising? The altar of murmuring or the altar of gratitude? The altar of guilt or the altar of promise? Jesus never asked you to deny your suffering. He invites you to change the language with which you face it. When he stood before the cross, he didn't say, "I can't do this." He said, "It is finished." John 19, verse 30. Those three words altered eternity, because in that moment, he wasn't announcing defeat. He was announcing the beginning of restoration for everything that had been lost. And maybe this is exactly.
But freedom rarely begins on the outside. It begins in the shadows of the mind, in the unseen places where you decide who you trust, what you believe, and which voice you will follow. That is why so many people lose battles they never knew they were fighting. The war wasn't at the job, in the family, in the relationship, or in the circumstance. The war was in the way they interpreted everything. Your perception either becomes a prison or a gateway, and most people never learn the difference. When Jesus spoke about transformation, he didn't start with behavior. He started with thought. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The pattern is always the same. Renewal precedes transformation, and transformation precedes breakthrough. But renewal is uncomfortable because it requires you to confront assumptions that feel safe even when they hurt you. The challenge is that your internal world becomes familiar even when it is dysfunctional. And familiarity is powerful. People remain in cycles not because they enjoy them, but because they know them. The unknown feels threatening even when it carries the promise of freedom. Jesus understood that too. That is why he didn't just challenge people to change, he invited them to see differently. Every parable was a reframing. Every miracle was a revelation. Every teaching was a gentle interruption to the mental narratives that had kept people small, afraid, or spiritually blind. And he is still doing the same with you. You have no idea how many limitations you've accepted simply because your mind told you they were normal. You don't even question them anymore. They show up as subtle statements that sound logical but are actually lies. This is just the way I am. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm too late. Everyone else moves forward, but I stay stuck. I'm not spiritual enough to hear God clearly. I'll always repeat the same mistakes. Thoughts like these don't appear as attacks, they appear as familiar truths, but they function like bars of a cage. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can get you to agree with a lie. That agreement alone is enough to sabotage your destiny. That is why Scripture calls him the father of lies. His strategy is not power, it is persuasion. He whispers interpretations, not disasters. He doesn't need to block your path if he can convince you there isn't one. But pay attention to something important. Every lie is built on the assumption that you won't examine it. Lies thrive in unawareness. The moment you become conscious of them, they lose their authority. This is why the Spirit illuminates. Revelation is not simply knowledge, it is exposure. It uncovers the lies you didn't know you believed. And when a lie is exposed, it dies. But exposure isn't comfortable. It requires humility because it forces you to admit that some of your assumptions were wrong, some of your fears were illusions, and some of your emotional reactions came from interpretations that God never authored. You cannot transform while protecting the lies that formed you. Jesus invites you into a new mental framework, not because he wants you to pretend the world is perfect, but because he wants you to perceive reality through truth instead of fear. Truth doesn't erase difficulty, but it reframes it. It reveals possibility in the places where fear only saw threat. Once your perception shifts, your world shifts. But here is the tension. The old mindset doesn't die quietly. It fights for survival because it has been your companion for years. It has defended you, justified you, explained you, and in its own distorted way, tried to protect you from disappointment. Even when it suffocated you, it felt like home. Transformation requires you to leave that home. And leaving any home is unsettling. It means stepping into a mental wilderness where the old explanations no longer make sense, but the new ones haven't fully taken shape. It is a psychological transition zone, and many people return to old patterns simply because the new landscape feels unfamiliar. God will often destabilize the lies you built your identity on before he establishes the truth he wants you to live by. This is why you might feel internally shaken. What used to comfort you no longer comforts you. What used to define you no longer fits you. What used to limit you no longer satisfies you. There is a holy discomfort that precedes every spiritual upgrade. It is the sensation of outgrowing an old mental shell that was never meant to be permanent. This is spiritual evolution. Not evolution of theology, but evolution of perception. You begin to see what God always saw. And when you see differently, you live differently. The mind is where destiny is negotiated. And destiny is not written with actions alone, but with interpretations. Two people can live the same moment, but experience two different realities based on the meaning their mind assigns to it. Meaning is powerful. Meaning can turn a delay into a punishment or a preparation. It can turn a setback into a sign of failure or a strategic redirection. Meaning can convince you that God is silent when he is actually guiding quietly. Meaning can make you abandon a promise that was seconds away from fulfillment. Never underestimate the power of interpretation. Every spiritual attack begins as a suggestion. Every breakthrough begins as a revelation. What you agree with becomes your master. What you meditate on becomes your environment. What you repeat becomes your identity. This is why Scripture says, take every thought captive, not some thoughts, every thought. You don't get to let your mind wander and then blame life for the consequences. You must become the gatekeeper of your mental world. But here's the good news. You don't guard your mind alone. The Spirit partners with your awareness. He highlights thoughts you should ignore, feelings you should question, impulses you should not follow, and truths you should adopt. He will never force you, but he will constantly offer you the clarity you need to choose freedom. The enemy will always offer confusion. God will always offer clarity. Confusion is the language of captivity. Clarity is the language of freedom. And clarity begins when you stop treating every thought as truth. You are not your thoughts. You are not your fears. You are not your emotions. You are not the interpretations your past handed you. You are not the assumptions you inherited. You are not the narratives your anxiety repeats. You are what God calls you. And what He calls you is stable, eternal, and unchanging. But until you believe that, your mind will continue to negotiate your worth through circumstances, achievements, failures, and the opinions of others. That negotiation always ends in insecurity because it is based on conditions that fluctuate daily. Identity rooted in anything temporary becomes instability disguised as logic. Jesus kept telling people, do not fear, not because fear is immoral, but because fear corrupts perception. A fearful mind cannot interpret God accurately. Fear magnifies the wrong voice. It amplifies the enemy and minimizes the divine. It exaggerates obstacles and erases possibilities. You cannot hear God clearly through the filter of fear. Faith is not just trust, it is clarity. Faith removes distortion. Faith restores accuracy. Faith aligns perception with truth instead of trauma. But faith is not automatic. It is cultivated. It grows as you choose agreement with what God says instead of what your mind assumes. This is why Jesus constantly asked people, do you believe? He wasn't asking for optimism. He was asking for alignment. Belief is alignment with divine reality. Doubt is alignment with mental distortion. And here is the truth most people avoid. Doubt feels safer than faith because doubt demands nothing. Faith requires movement. Doubt requires suspension. Faith leads forward. Doubt keeps you in place. Faith confronts fear. Doubt negotiates with it. Faith forces transformation. Doubt defends limitation. If you allow doubt to direct your interpretation, you will eventually adopt a theology built on fear instead of truth. And once your theology shifts, your expectations shift. You begin expecting less, asking for less, believing for less. You shrink your prayers, you lower your standards, and you adapt to a life smaller than the one God designed. Not because God withdrew, but because your mind imagined a God too small to trust. But God does not shrink to accommodate your fear. He continues challenging you to think beyond the ceiling your past created, the ceiling your insecurities reinforced, the ceiling your trauma normalized. He keeps calling you higher, not because He wants you to pretend nothing hurts, but because He knows that if your mind changes, your life will too. Transformation is not magic. It is alignment with truth, alignment with identity, alignment with divine perspective. Everything begins in the mind. And God is inviting you to renovate that internal world before He expands your external world. The most transformative moments in your spiritual life will not happen in the noise of external change, but in the quiet recalibration of your internal world. God begins His greatest works in places no one can see. Before He shifts your circumstances, He shifts your perception of them. Before He opens new doors, He prepares your mind to walk through them. Before He brings new seasons, He renews the patterns that govern how you interpret His voice. If He transformed your life without transforming your mind, your life would eventually collapse under the weight of your own unrenewed thoughts. You would sabotage the blessing with the same patterns that created the bondage. You would misinterpret provision as pressure, opportunity as threat, silence as abandonment, and waiting as rejection. This is the paradox. People pray for change but resist the inner renovation required for change to last. And renovation requires demolition. Before God builds, He breaks old structures, not to harm you, but to remove the scaffolding that never should have supported you in the first place. Some of the beliefs you carried for years were survival mechanisms, not truth. They made sense in the environment where they were formed, but they are incompatible with the future God is preparing you for. This is why certain thoughts feel increasingly uncomfortable. It isn't random, it's a signal. You are outgrowing interpretations that once felt normal. Growing spiritually always feels like losing something mentally, not because God is taking something from you, but because He's taking you somewhere that the old mindset cannot follow. When the Israelites were delivered from Egypt, their bodies left bondage, but their minds remained enslaved. They walked physically free while thinking psychologically captive. They were out, but not released. They were delivered, but not transformed. They longed for the very place that had oppressed them, simply because their mind had never learned how to interpret freedom. This is what happens when God elevates your life faster than your mind evolves. You will try to return to the mental Egypt that feels familiar, even when it no longer matches who you are becoming. It is possible to walk into a new season with an old mindset and never recognize the opportunities God placed in front of you. That is why God is confronting the narratives that once felt comfortable. He is challenging assumptions that used to give you identity. He is dismantling the internal patterns that made sense in the wilderness, but are incompatible with the promised land. Every time God exposes a lie you believed, He is not humiliating you. He is liberating you. But liberation feels like crisis before it feels like clarity. When truth begins to enter the mind, the first thing it destroys is the illusion of certainty. Suddenly, you see the cracks in the stories you told yourself. You notice the weakness in your interpretations. You realize how many of your reactions weren't based on truth, but on fear disguised as logic.
Awareness is painful, but it is the birthplace of transformation. You cannot heal what you will not acknowledge. You cannot grow beyond what you refuse to question. You cannot become who God designed you to be while defending the beliefs that were formed by wounds rather than by wisdom. Growth requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. Courage to admit that some of your emotional reflexes were shaped by old trauma. Courage to admit that some of your conclusions were built on incomplete information. Courage to admit that some of your spiritual assumptions came from disappointment, not revelation. God is not asking you to condemn yourself. He is asking you to confront yourself. Self-condemnation traps you in shame. Self-confrontation frees you into truth. Truth will always demand more from you than the lie demanded, because truth requires responsibility. But truth also gives you access to the life the lie restricted. This is why Jesus said the truth sets you free. Not feel better, not get lucky, not become instantly perfect. Truth sets you free when you align with it. But alignment requires awareness, and awareness requires stillness. You cannot recognize God's voice if your mind is dominated by noise. You cannot perceive clarity if you are addicted to distraction. You cannot discern truth if your internal world is constantly echoing fear-based narratives. Silence is not empty. Silence is where discernment becomes possible. Most people do not struggle to hear God. They struggle to quiet internal chaos long enough to differentiate His voice from the noise of their interpretations. God often whispers, not because He is distant, but because whispers force you to lean in. They require focus. They require presence. They require stillness. They require you to tune out the voices that compete for control of your perception. Discernment is not a spiritual luxury. It is a survival skill. In a world full of information, impressions, impulses, and internal monologues, discernment is what keeps you aligned with truth instead of seduced by noise. Without discernment, the loudest thoughts feel like the truest ones. Without discernment, anxiety sounds like wisdom, fear sounds like intuition, and self-preservation sounds like divine instruction. Discernment is the ability to differentiate between your mind's reaction and God's direction. This is the difference between spiritual maturity and spiritual confusion. Immature believers interpret God through their emotions. Mature believers interpret their emotions through God. Your emotions are real, but they are not authoritative. They are signals, not instructions. They reveal where healing is needed, not what reality is. And mental clarity increases as spiritual perspective expands.
You cannot have emotional maturity without mental renewal, and you cannot have mental renewal without spiritual alignment. Transformation is holistic. It touches the mind, the heart, the interpretation, and the spirit. God does not fix one part of you while ignoring the others. He renews you entirely. But renewal is a process, not an event. You do not wake up one morning suddenly healed from every misinterpretation. You grow through phases, layers, and revelations. What was invisible becomes visible. What was assumed becomes examined. What was defended becomes surrendered. What was unquestioned becomes challenged. What was tolerated becomes rejected. What was normal becomes unacceptable. This is spiritual growth, an unlearning followed by a learning. You release what was formed in darkness. You adopt what is revealed in light. You replace fear with faith. You replace assumptions with truth. You replace distortion with accuracy. You replace survival patterns with spiritual authority. And eventually, you begin to think differently, speak differently, respond differently, pray differently, and discern differently. The mind that once sabotaged you becomes the mind that supports you. The interpretations that kept you small become interpretations that expand you. The narratives that once drained you become narratives that empower you. This is the promise of renewal. You begin to live from the inside out instead from the outside in. Most people live externally reactive lives. They interpret themselves through circumstances instead of interpreting circumstances through identity. Renewal inverts the process. It teaches you to root your internal world in truth so deeply that external instability cannot uproot you. You become grounded in clarity, grounded in purpose, grounded in identity, grounded in spiritual authority, grounded in the voice of God. A grounded mind does not panic in unknown seasons. It does not collapse under pressure. It does not confuse silence with absence. It does not misinterpret delay as denial. It does not give fear permission to rewrite theology. A grounded mind is stable because it is anchored in truth, not emotion. This is the mental and spiritual maturity God is developing in you. He is not only teaching you to recognize His voice, He is teaching you to interpret your own internal landscape with wisdom instead of confusion. And part of that growth includes learning how to differentiate between spiritual warfare and psychological patterns. Not every struggle is an attack. Some are unresolved wounds. Not every discomfort is warfare. Some are mental transitions. Not every resistance is the enemy. Some resistance is your old self fighting to maintain control. Discernment teaches you to respond correctly. When the enemy resist. When your mind is unhealed, reflect. When God is stretching you, surrender. When truth confronts you, align. When fear rises, stand firm. When clarity comes, move. When silence comes, listen. When revelation comes, obey. Spiritual authority begins with internal clarity. You cannot cast out a lie you still agree with. You cannot rebuke an enemy whose voice you confuse with your own thoughts. You cannot speak victory when your interpretations mirror defeat. You cannot walk in purpose while thinking like someone unworthy of it. Renewal aligns your internal world with the identity God already sees in you. You are not being transformed into someone new. You are becoming who you have always been in God's eyes, but who your mind was too clouded to recognize. As the mind transforms, purpose becomes clearer. Not because God changes, but because your perception finally catches up to what He has been saying all along. Purpose is not discovered through external exploration. It is revealed through internal clarity. People often chase answers outside themselves, searching for signs, confirmations, opportunities, open doors, and prophetic instructions. But purpose was never meant to be hunted. It was meant to be recognized. And you can only recognize it when your mind stops filtering God's voice through the distortions of fear, insecurity, shame, or limitation. A confused mind cannot perceive a clear calling. This is why God prioritizes transformation of perception before He assigns responsibility of calling. He is not withholding direction, He is preparing you to recognize it. He is not delaying your purpose, He is calibrating your internal world so that your purpose doesn't feel like pressure, but alignment. When your mind is unrenewed, even divine assignments feel like threats to your comfort. But when your mind is renewed, assignments feel like answers to your design. Many people assume their purpose is complicated, but purpose is rarely complicated. What complicates purpose is the mindset interpreting it. When the mind is clouded, everything feels uncertain. When the mind is healed, everything feels aligned. This is why God often speaks identity before He speaks assignment. He told Gideon, "You are a mighty warrior," before He told him to fight. He told Moses, "I will be with you," before he confronted Pharaoh. He told Jeremiah, "I knew you," before he spoke to nations. He affirmed Jesus publicly before Jesus did anything publicly. Identity precedes assignment because clarity precedes calling. You cannot step into what you doubt you are worthy of. You cannot steward what you secretly believe you are unqualified for. You cannot obey instructions that contradict your internal narrative of inadequacy. Purpose collapses under the weight of a mind that still believes lies about identity. This is why God is rewriting the scripts you tell yourself. He is dismantling the self-concepts that your past cemented. He is removing labels that trauma attached to your personality. He is tearing down the false narratives formed during childhood wounds. He is exposing the lies that shame whispered into your conscience. He is interrupting generational patterns that normalized distortion as identity. Spiritually, you are not being rebuilt, you are being remembered. God is bringing back to the surface the identity that was buried beneath years of internal noise. And once identity becomes clear, purpose becomes obvious. Purpose does not shout, it resonates. It feels like alignment, not pressure. It feels like recognition, not confusion. It feels like home, not a burden. It feels like a natural expression of who you truly are, not an act you have to perform to impress God or people. Your mind will tell you purpose is somewhere out there. God will show you purpose emerges from within. When the mind is renewed, purpose is not forced, it flows. But purpose is not only about what you do, it is about how you interpret the journey that leads you to doing it. A renewed mind interprets challenges as training, not punishment. It interprets waiting as preparation, not rejection. It interprets obstacles as refinement, not evidence of failure. It interprets silence as instruction, not abandonment. Your interpretation of each season determines how you experience it. Two people can walk through the same trial, but the one with a renewed mind sees opportunity, while the one with an unrenewed mind sees only threat. One sees refinement, the other sees ruin. One sees growth, the other sees loss. One sees God's hand, the other sees God's absence. Reality is not what happens to you. Reality is what your mind tells you it means. This is why the enemy attacks meaning, not moments. He manipulates perception, not circumstance. If he can distort your interpretation, he doesn't need to change your environment. Your own thoughts will imprison you. But once the mind is aligned with truth, the enemy loses influence. He can still whisper, but he cannot persuade you. He can still attempt, but he cannot access you. The door he used to walk through has been sealed by clarity. Clarity is spiritual protection. It is the shield that prevents you from accepting lies simply because they feel familiar. It is the safeguard that stops you from surrendering to old thought patterns during moments of vulnerability. It is the boundary that defines what voices are allowed to speak into your identity. And once clarity settles in your mind, peace becomes possible. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of accuracy.
You experience true peace when your interpretation finally aligns with God's reality. Peace is not fragile. Peace is not easily shaken. Peace is spiritual accuracy. When the mind is clear, peace becomes stable. And from peace, strength emerges. Not the strength of self-reliance, but the strength of grounded identity. A person with a renewed mind does not collapse when seasons shift. They do not lose themselves when plans fail. They do not crumble when people betray them. They do not panic when circumstances change unexpectedly. Their stability is rooted not in predictability, but in perspective.
Perspective is the most powerful spiritual resource you possess. If you see wrongly, you live wrongly. If you see accurately, you live aligned. God is not only transforming how you think, He is transforming what you see. A renewed mind does not only think differently about God, it sees Him differently. It sees His patterns, His timing, His wisdom, His silence, His alignment. A renewed mind does not interpret God through insecurity, it interprets circumstances through God's character. This is the shift that takes you from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity. Spiritual infants expect God to remove discomfort. Spiritual adults expect God to develop discernment. Infants want control. Adults want alignment. Infants look for signs. Adults cultivate sensitivity. Infants want miracles without change. Adults want transformation that sustains miracles. God is forming spiritual adulthood in you. Adulthood does not mean emotional perfection. It means spiritual clarity. It means you can navigate seasons with wisdom, not panic. It means you recognize when God is speaking and when your mind is reacting. It means you differentiate between your voice, God's voice, and the enemy's suggestions. This is why the wilderness is often the classroom of clarity. People misunderstand the wilderness. They assume it is punishment, but the wilderness is preparation. It is where noise dies, where identity is tested, where truth is refined, where false narratives surface, where discernment matures. The wilderness exposes your mind's most persistent lies, not to shame you, but to free you, not to diminish you, but to grow you, not to discourage you, but to refine your interpretation. Most people try to escape the wilderness prematurely. They want the blessing without the breaking, the calling without the clarity, the assignment without the alignment. But God is too invested in your future to allow you to walk into it unprepared. He loves you too much to promote you into a season your mind is not renewed enough to handle. He would rather frustrate your timeline than let you carry an old mindset into a new calling. If the Israelites had entered the Promised Land with an unrenewed mind, they would have rebuilt Egypt inside Canaan. And if you enter your next season with your old mindset, you will rebuild old patterns inside new blessings. This is why God confronts your mind before He upgrades your life. He is protecting you from the self-sabotage you don't even realize you are capable of. The hardest battles you will ever fight are not against spiritual darkness, they are against your own mental habits. Darkness can be rebuked, mental habits must be replaced. Spiritual warfare is often just the mind resisting unfamiliar freedom. Freedom feels threatening when captivity feels familiar. You can pray for deliverance from the enemy, but you must partner with God for deliverance from yourself. God delivers you from bondage instantly, but He delivers you from old thinking gradually. Instant deliverance changes your environment. Gradual renewal changes your identity. This is why you still struggle with patterns even after spiritual breakthroughs. Breakthrough breaks chains. Renewal removes their imprints. You are not weak, you are in transition. You are not failing, you are being restructured. You are not going backwards, you are being rebuilt. Every part of you that used to rely on fear is losing its influence. Every belief that used to hold you back is being challenged. Every narrative that once felt like truth is dissolving under the weight of revelation. Renewal makes you uncomfortable before it makes you unstoppable. And God is not asking you to rush the process, He is asking you to stay aligned long enough for the transformation to root deeply. Consistency produces clarity, produces confidence. Confidence produces obedience. Obedience produces breakthrough. Breakthrough produces authority. This is the trajectory of renewal. Authority is the final stage. It is where you no longer negotiate with the lies that once dominated you. It is where you no longer entertain narratives that contradict your identity. It is where you no longer shrink under pressure. It is where you interpret life through truth instinctively. Authority is not loud, it is stable. There comes a moment in every journey of transformation when the mind is no longer fighting against truth, but finally surrendering to it. A moment when the internal resistance that once felt so familiar begins to lose its power. A moment when the lies that once shaped your identity no longer feel convincing. A moment when clarity becomes louder than confusion. You are arriving at that moment. Everything you have walked through in this process has been preparing you for internal alignment. Your mind is not your enemy, it is the battleground where God has been reclaiming territory. And now, after layers of renewal, confrontation, exposure, and refinement, your perception is shifting into a new spiritual rhythm. This is where transformation becomes visible. Not because circumstances suddenly change, but because you begin to interpret them differently. The storms that once terrified you no longer shake you. The delays that once frustrated you now reveal their purpose. The silence that once felt threatening now feels instructive. The challenges that once felt like attacks now feel like training. This is the sign of a renewed mind. Your internal world becomes stronger than your external world. People often measure spiritual growth by results, open doors, or visible blessings, but the truest measure of growth is internal stability. When you can face uncertainty without panic, when you can hear God without demanding signs, when you can wait without feeling abandoned, when you can move without needing full explanations, when you can trust without understanding all the details. This stability is not natural, it is cultivated. And you have been cultivating it through every revelation, every realignment, every moment of awareness, and every layer of truth God has revealed in your process. You are not the same person you were when this journey began. Your thoughts move differently, your discernment is sharper, your spirit is quieter, your clarity is stronger, your identity is firmer. What once controlled you no longer defines you. What once intimidated you no longer shapes you. What once confused you no longer directs you. A renewed mind doesn't mean you will never face fear or doubt again. It means fear will no longer dominate your interpretation. Doubt will no longer hijack your identity. Pain will no longer rewrite your truth, and the enemy will no longer disguise his whispers as your inner voice. You have learned to recognize the difference. This is spiritual maturity, the ability to move from instinctive reaction to intentional interpretation. You are no longer living from old narratives, inherited assumptions, or unhealed patterns. You are living from truth, from revelation, from alignment. And now, as you step into the next chapter of your life, God is not only giving you clarity for your internal world, He is positioning you for impact in your external world. A transformed mind becomes a transformed life. Your decisions begin to reflect your identity instead of your insecurities. Your relationships begin to reflect your boundaries instead of your wounds. Your purpose begins to flow effortlessly because you are no longer negotiating with lies that once told you you were unqualified, unseen, or unworthy. You are stepping into the design God always intended. But before this final stage of transition, there is something essential you must understand. God transformed your mind not just for your sake, but so you can now carry clarity into environments filled with confusion. He renewed your identity so you can carry stability into places filled with instability. He aligned your perception so you can be a light in spaces where others still walk through mental fog. A renewed mind becomes a ministry. A transformed perception becomes a testimony. A stable identity becomes an anchor for others. A healed interpretation becomes a doorway for someone else's breakthrough. Everything God healed in you becomes something He will heal through you. You are not only walking into clarity, you are carrying clarity. And there are people whose lives will change simply because you learn to think, perceive, and interpret through truth instead of distortion. This is why the renewal of your mind mattered so much. It wasn't just about survival, it was preparation for influence. You cannot lead others into freedom while thinking like a captive. You cannot speak truth into others while believing lies about yourself. You cannot carry purpose while interpreting life through fear. You cannot walk in authority while negotiating with your old identity. You had to be renewed before you could be released. And now, as you step into this final stretch, the call is simple. Guard the clarity you have gained. Protect it, nourish it, strengthen it, revisit it. Do not let old patterns reclaim the territory God has restored. Do not let old familiar voices dilute the revelation He has given you. Do not let fear reinterpret what God has already made clear. Your mind is no longer a battlefield. It is becoming a sanctuary, a place where God speaks freely, a place where truth lives comfortably, a place where purpose grows deeply, a place where identity stands unshaken, a place where fear has no authority. This is the beginning of your next season, not because circumstances will suddenly become easy, but because your mind is now capable of navigating them with wisdom, peace, authority, and discernment. You are ready. Not perfect, not finished, not flawless, but aligned, awake, renewed, strengthened, prepared. God has brought you to the threshold of internal freedom so He can lead you into external purpose. And now the journey continues. You have more to learn, more to grow into, more to discover, and more to become. But you are no longer walking blind. You are walking renewed. And before you leave this message, I want to speak directly to you. If this journey of renewal, clarity, and transformation has been speaking to your spirit, if these words have opened your understanding, if you feel God working inside your mind, your perceptions, your identity, and your purpose, then stay connected. There is much more coming, more teachings, more revelations, more insights that will strengthen your spiritual journey and expand your understanding. So take a step right now. Don't postpone what can shift your entire spiritual trajectory today. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, leave your comment, share this message. Do not wait until later. Later becomes never. Act now and stay committed to this journey of deep transformation. There is so much more that God wants to reveal to you, and I want to keep walking beside you, guiding you, strengthening you, and helping you break every mental and spiritual barrier that has held you back for years. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel, you're reinforcing your own spiritual growth. You're choosing to stay connected to teachings that renew your mind, sharpen your discernment, heal your inner world, and align your life with the purpose God designed specifically for you. So click and subscribe right now. Take ownership of your growth. Step boldly into what God has for you. Let's walk into the next phase together.